Have you ever heard about this concept of third culture kids? The first time I heard about it was several years ago in a conversation with my friend Sean. We were talking about living in different regions and different countries and how all these cultures influence us. I realized that this concept of third culture kid is strongly related to transculturality. My name is Ryan, and I speak and talk about transculturality. How it is to live in and with different cultures, how all these cultural elements influence us, and how we can live in peace, including all these different cultural elements in ourselves. In our conversation, Sean and I will talk about third culture kids, inner conflicts, and how it is to include all these cultures in our lives. Interested? Hello, Sean.
Hey Ryan.
Thank you very much for having accepted my invitation to this little chat about this passionate topic.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
For me, you are a perfect example how we can live transculturality without any problem, and you have a very interesting biography. So
Thank you.
maybe we can start with the first question about, can you tell us a bit in which regions you have lived and with what kind of cultures you were in contact with?
Yeah, I think the most common question that somebody would ask me is, or anyone else, is where I'm from. So I will start from there. Um, and so I was born in Indonesia, and at the age of 5, my whole family, along with my parents and brothers, 2 younger brothers, moved to California. There I grew up for 15 years. I went back to Indonesia for 1 year, and then I went to study in the Netherlands for 4 years. I also did my internship in Germany for 1 year. And then I went to Spain, where I am now in Barcelona, which I've been living now for a little bit more than 10 years. And so if you ask me which culture I've actually had the chance to have contact with and experience, although I've traveled a lot of countries and places around the world, to define, just to be more specific, where I was able to actually learn more about the culture by living there for quite for quite an amount of time, I would say the regions or countries I've been in is obviously, as I mentioned, Indonesia, since I was born, and then California, which I grew up for 15 years, and the Netherlands, where I studied for 4 years, Germany for 1 year, Spain for 10 years. But I also traveled a good amount of time, 4 times to Morocco, because I did my yoga retreat there. So I had a pretty interesting and good experience with the Moroccan culture. I also traveled to eastern part of Europe, like Latvia and Russia, and I knew some people there. I dated a few people there, so I got to know their culture quite well as well. So yeah, those were the main, I would say, main regions or countries that I've had experience of learning their culture.
Oh, this is so interesting. We usually talk Spanish and English, so we mix up the languages, but today we maintain our conversation in English. This is
Yes.
also something transcultural. The first time I've heard about this concept of third culture kids was with you in a conversation, and I would like to know where and when you have heard about this concept, about this word, and
Yeah.
why did it appeal to you at that time?
Yeah, so I considered you as well, Ryan, as a third culture kid, and I had thought back then that you would have known it. I thought it was a quite popular term, and I was the person that was really late in knowing this term, TKC or TCK or third culture kid. I don't really remember exactly when, but I'm pretty sure it was sometime around the end of my bachelor's year when I was studying in the Netherlands. So probably my 4th year, almost during my graduation year or after my graduation year. And I think how I found out about this term was I was just Googling around probably queries around something about like people who've traveled around the world. I think it was more about identity crisis or somewhere in that level. And I started reading a few blogs here and there, some articles, and then all these articles slowly led me to this term or terminology, which is a third culture kid. And when I learned about that, just knowing and understanding what it means, the definition, I immediately reacted to it saying, oh, this is definitely me. This is what I've been looking for my whole life. And yeah, that's when I actually discovered it. Because I guess
And
we
you were
can,
happy when you discovered it? You were
yes,
happy? Mhm.
yes, I think everybody's always trying, everybody's always trying to find a purpose for living. What is their purpose in life? And I was looking for more about why do I feel empty inside? Although I'm not actually sad or I'm not actually, feeling like I just felt like something was missing. And it wasn't because, I lacked direction towards where I want to be or how I want to be when I grow up, but it was more like of an identity crisis. I couldn't really figure out who I was or who I am or where I want to be. And as soon as I found out about this third culture kit, it really helped me relax, understanding that, hey, it's okay for you at the stage where I was to be confused, to feel lost, to feel not knowing who you are or where you want to be, or why is it that at some stage in your life you feel lonely even though you're surrounded by lots of friends, and at other stage you're alone, but then you feel like you're at home even though you're not actually at home. And I always ask my question, what is home anyway? And maybe when I was around 18 years old, I would have said, yeah, my home was from my home is the United States. And then as I started like living abroad, I keep asking myself, where is home? While I was studying abroad, everybody was going home to visit their family for Christmas or during the summer break. And I really didn't feel like I had a home to go back to. Also at the same time, I was in a very tight economic situation where as a student, I'd rather go for a summer job than to go home and spend lots of money, because going to Indonesia was like quite expensive for me, or going to the US. So I rather stayed, and I was fine with that. People ask me questions like, why don't you go home? Why don't you, don't you feel lonely? And I was actually pretty fine. But then I asked myself that same question. Why is it? Why is it that I don't feel lonely when I am alone? Or do I feel lonely when I'm surrounded by lots of people? So um, to your question, that's where I found out about third culture kid, the term, when I was like right at the end of my university in the Netherlands, my bachelor's degree. And that's how I felt like, oh, this is exactly what it's the definition of how I feel with it, which is the third culture kid.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
And I would like to come back to this question, where are you from? Because this is a question that annoys a lot of people.
Yeah.
What do you exactly answer when someone asks you, where are you from? And what would you like to tell this person, where are you from? Where
Yeah.
you are from? What
Yeah.
are there differences in your answers? What you say and what you would like to say?
Yes, so I think everybody who is a third culture kid like me, or who's been abroad for such a long time and consider themselves as a world citizen like me, I would say, this kind of question really bugs you out, meaning that it's very problematic to answer. It's not an easy question to answer. But I've kind of come to terms because probably maybe 5 years, not even 5 years, I would say 10 years ago, if you asked me this question, I would be annoyed because I wouldn't be able to answer you quick. I wouldn't give you a quick answer. But now I've come to terms and say, hey, listen, it's a way for people to kind of get to know you more. And it's okay for me to say, I'm from Indonesia. And I'll tell you why. In the beginning, when people ask me where you're from, I wanted to explain to them everything, right, about my life in a very short answer, like how I explained where I was. Oh, I was from Indonesia, I was born there, but then I grew up in California, and then I traveled here and there and there. But people, I don't want to waste people's time because it's just like they don't want to hear my whole life story. It's just a general question of introducing each other. And so what I realize now is I just simply tell them what I think would make them connect easier with their mind. Like, yeah, I'm just from Indonesia, and that's totally fine. But honestly, if I'm able to explain to them, which I'm more than happy to do so, when they start to ask me more questions, oh, then why do you speak so well? Why do you speak English so well? Or how come you have a certain manner where it's not so Asian or so Indonesian? Then I started explaining a little bit more. Yeah, well, that's because I grew up here and I started my studies there. So yeah, I would gradually explain more. Other than that, I've come to my terms where, hey, it's okay if I just give them a straight answer, say I'm from Indonesia, because because actually it's kind of like a teaser, because then it helps them ask me more questions. As I mentioned, as soon as I start speaking, they're like, "Oh, why do you speak English so well?" I was like, "Well, that's because I grew up in California." It's like, "Oh, how come you were able to speak Spanish as well?" "Oh, that's because I lived in Spain for 10 years." So rather than give them the whole answer right away, it's kind of building up that nice conversation where you can actually connect with that person if they're interested more and more.
Hmm. And it's also the fact, I think, because Indonesia is not negatively connotated, so people would not be afraid of you if you say, I'm from Indonesia.
Yeah, that's a very great point. But you know why I was 10 years ago, if someone would ask me where I'm from, and I would feel so incomplete to say I'm from Indonesia, because it is technically it is incomplete to say that. But stereotypism is normal, right? Everybody, even I, somehow do a little bit of stereotypes. Just try to not go so much, but just so that you can kind of identify who the person is based on where they're from. And I did felt annoyed. I feel annoyed when I would think that this person think I was just from Asia, but that's because I was a little bit insecure because I wanted to, in a way, show them I'm not only from Asia, but I have a good education from this country and I lived from that country. And now I don't really, I've gained enough confidence to say, hey, I'm from Indonesia or I'm from Asia in that region. And that's totally cool. That's totally fine. Because back then I was still not sure about my cultural identity. So I was always considering myself, oh, I'm westernized. I'm a Western guy, although I have an Asian complexion, or I'm an American. Back then I would definitely say I'm an American, but now I'm just like I'm Indonesian, but I have a world view of everything. So yeah.
Oh, perfect. This leads us to the next question because we all have dealt with inner conflicts. So you mentioned some of them,
Yeah.
and often these conflicts are the result of what others say. For
Yeah.
example, you don't belong to us, or you have to behave differently, or you are lost, or you have the worst one, you have a double identity.
Yeah.
Which more conflicts did you have, and how have you managed to overcome them?
Yeah, like I said, I think the short answer to this is just gaining enough confidence in knowing who you are as yourself. Um, and it's normal, when you're 25, even up to 30, you're still unsure about who you are, who yourself is, and you want to have other people's views, uh, like you want them to think good or think like even to a certain extent great about you. But after gaining enough confidence, I'd say, or just going through a lot of failures or understanding, growing older or mature, I would say, I came to realization and accept who I am. And so some of my inner conflicts was that, like, I wasn't sure who I was, and I wanted other people to think of me as that I wasn't just another typical Asian person. Everybody wants to be special in general, right?
Everyone is special.
Everyone is special. Everyone wants to be or wants to be treated special, but everyone is special, yeah. And so I always wanted people to think of me differently because in a way I was different, but I didn't want to enforce that in a way of thinking, and that was my inner conflict. I wanted people to know that I am just not some Indonesian because it's coming back to the stereotypes, right? And it's normal, you know. Someone I would say a Western person would look at me and like, oh, he's from Asia, so he must like, for instance, like rice, white rice, which I'm very openly confident to say that. Or he must like, he must not be able to drink a lot or drink a lot of beer. So some of this kind of small stuff that you grow up, especially when you're like a teenager or even going through university and then you meet other cultures. Everybody also wants to feel like they're part of something, whether it's a country or an organization or a club or a clan or some sort. I mean, when I first came to Europe and then I never watched soccer, well, football here, what they call it, and I've never watched it in my life until I actually arrived in the Netherlands, and it was such a big thing. And I like watching it in the end, and it's really cool because you get a whole bunch of international people to watch it together. But you can see that the Brazilians are rooting for the Brazilian team, and then you have the Italian team rooting for the Italian team. And I wasn't really rooting for anybody because first of all, soccer is not really my thing. Football isn't really my thing. And rooting for the Indonesian team, they're like probably in the last, So I wanted to find a identity where I could be mostly proud of. And that was my inner conflict. It comes down just to not having enough confidence, self-confidence of who I was. And it's normal. It's all part of the journey. It takes time for you to process through that. And then afterwards, you just come to terms and you realize this is who you are, accept it, and don't look at it as a disadvantage, but actually as a benefit or as a strength.
Mm-hmm. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
If you could give to your 14 years old Sean a tip today, what would you tell him regarding this topic?
Yeah, so regarding this topic specifically, when I was 14, I was still in the US. And back then, I didn't really think much about my identity because, first of all, when in California, I think more than 50% are all minorities, meaning you will see a lot of different race or ethnicity, people from South America, people from Asia, African Americans, Caucasians, Middle Eastern, so people from all over the world. They're in California. I think that's one of my biggest. I would say I'm so grateful and lucky just to kind of had a childhood in California where I was able to just adapt to a multiculturalism since I was young. So at the age 14, I wasn't really I didn't really think too much about my identity. If anything, my identity was, am I a skater, or am I a punk rock guy, or am I a dancer, or some some other guy? Mm-hmm. But if I would give one advice to my 14-year-old, I would have told him to just travel more often, because I didn't really get to travel. I didn't really start traveling until I left the US when I was 20 years old. Okay. So I would have just advised myself to travel more and not travel within America, but travel outside. I know that a lot of Europeans, they're so accustomed to traveling at a very young age, so that's really cool. And I think Canadians as well. They're really into this, they have this travel mindset, doing Erasmus or this study abroad when they're at the very young age. That way, I could have learned a second language much quicker, or a third language to be fair. Yeah.
Okay, cool. How are you living your transculturality today? So, what cultural elements from the different regions that influenced you do you still maintain, or do you have certain rituals that have become an integral part of your life?
Yes. how I'm able to use my experiences in having this transcultural experience.
Yes.
You mean?
And also, how does being transcultural help you in your job? You're an online marketer and you're a yoga teacher. And how does all this experience that you have, this cultural experience, help you every day?
I think it's a cliche to say this, but it is very important. Is to be open-minded, and if I have to drill down further to what does open-minded means, it's being tolerant. And I learned this from the Dutch people; they're very tolerant. And being tolerant is being very diplomatic. And I would say these two are the most, these are the two characteristics that I'm able to convey based on my experience of living or adapting to different cultures and understanding different cultures and accepting different cultures, accepting people who they are. I would never really question people why they are so different. I would try to look at more at what are our similarities more than what are our differences. And by focusing more on our similarities, I'm able to connect much easily with other people, whether that's in my job or in my social life or in my day-to-day, life here in the city or traveling around the world. And yeah, that helped me a lot in my profession, especially because as you know, I'm a digital marketer, and as a digital marketer, for me as a marketer, is basically to know your customers and to be able to provide your customers the uh, exact solution that they need. And to know your customers, you just have to understand them by accepting them who they are, because not all customers are the same. And from there you can actually give them what they need, as opposed to give them something that has been fabricated based on your subconscious mind, thinking that, oh, if it's a female around between this age and she must be born from this, or she's from this ethnicity, then she must like this. No, it's, you just start from the basics. And I think nowadays with the internet, it has kind of, if not, it definitely has globalized everything. I mean, everybody from I don't know, from America to all the way to Africa to Asia, they're watching the same things that everybody's
That's
watching.
true.
So
Yes.
pop culture, especially the American Hollywood, has gone over across the board, all over the world. So with the internet, everything's kind of globalized. There is,
Yes.
yeah. So
And it's so important what you said, that you focus on the similarities and not on the differences. For me,
yeah,
this is the basic. Yeah, the basics
it
is very
is.
important.
And it's so, I think it's very common that somebody always tries to see the differences, because it's what
That's true.
distinguishes them from their culture, from their country to another. Oh, for how the Italians cook their pasta this way, rather than looking at like the differences. It's like, what are the similarities? Maybe they have the same recipe that they use. Maybe they use some kind of ingredient, that they use, that the other country also use, and then just kind of build that relationship based on similarities, as opposed to, oh, I'm so different.
Yeah, cool. And my last question would be, what is your tip? How can we accept ourselves as we are and live in peace with all cultural elements that now belong to us? Because there are some people that are not really accepting that they are living in a country, and they are not very happy. And so what can we do to live in peace with all these cultures that are around us? What is your tip?
Yeah. It's an ongoing development, including myself. But as long as that's the trajectory that you're going towards, I think that's great. And this is gonna come out very superficial, but we'll finally be able to bring world peace.
Yeah.
Everybody is somehow able to really fully understand each other. And just because you understand a person doesn't mean you have to agree to them. Right? I mean, there are certain cultures that, not that I dislike, but I disagree in how they do things. But you have to respect that. and you have to tolerate that, and you have to be diplomatic about that. It's all about trying to understand each other. I think we learned this, you and I were from Toastmasters, from public speaking, understand each other by firstly listening to one another, as opposed to talking over to each other of what my needs are, what their needs are. And that's my number one tip. It's from my experience, obviously, because I wouldn't be able to give you guys other tips, but just based on my experiences, first and foremost, be comfortable of your own skin, who you are, whether you're gay or straight or coming from different country, the color of your skin or your sexual orientation. Just really, once you come to terms of who you are, that means that you're able to identify your own culture. I mean, unfortunately, but that's how it is in society, that your identity somehow it's influenced or it's formulated by society, by external factors that tells you that this is how you have to be. But once you gain enough confidence, which is over time you'll build, and that's where I got my confidence from, just experiencing all this, going through life, then you're able to feel comfortable with yourself. And once you feel very comfortable with yourself, you don't need to be an antagonist or feeling a little bit of, how would I say it, going against another person because they're different. Because once you're very comfortable with yourself, you wouldn't really care if the other person is different. Because I think in most cases, people are afraid of other people because they're afraid that that other person might influence themselves. But once you build your strong belief about who you are, you should not be worried about other people influencing you, but just being acceptable of who that other person is.
Mm-hmm.
And so just to summarize, gain that confidence of who you are and being able to accept other cultures by being more tolerant and be more diplomatic. Being more diplomatic means, hey, I don't share the same belief as you, but it's coming back to, but we have this common similarities. We have this common culture that we share, and we can work on that. So step by step.
Okay, thank you very much. This was very, very interesting, as always, when we talk about this topic and other topics as well.
Yes.
You are now you're in Barcelona, and I'm here in Germany, and Corona is putting us together. And I think this pandemic situation is also something positive in these days, because we can communicate around the world with so many other people and share our experiences.
Yes. Yeah. And I think it also helps us to, coming from a yoga teacher, helps us look more within than outside. We are contained. And so we are forced to focus within ourselves, to find ways to entertain ourselves, as opposed to look for external factors or something else outside that would keeps us busy with our minds. So I think unfortunately, this coronavirus has affected a lot of people, but
Yes.
You can also find some good points from this.
That's true. Okay, thank you very, very much, Sean, for this conversation.
Thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure, and talk to you next time.
Yeah, bye.
Bye.